Ever since Boyd and Sarah went into the woods, we saw a bunch of interesting things that make you ask what's actually going on in this fucked up town. In the woods, they ended up coming across the bottle tree. This scene really made me start thinking, who the hell put these bottles up in the middle of the fucking forest? It means that there's at least one person who's been going there seemingly on a regular basis, because I don't think that they set them up all at once, but slowly over time. So Boyd naturally decides to take one of the bottles to see what's inside. Sarah has a whole meltdown thing, but Boyd ends up opening one of the bottles anyways. Turns out the only thing inside the bottle are the words 1864. What's that supposed to mean? Assuming the other bottles have something similar, then why would someone be writing a bunch of different years and hanging them on bottles from the trees? Usually the point of writings placed in bottles is to send a message. But who's the message for? That is the question. And we know it's not Victor because he already said it wasn't him, so don't even try that.
Who put the bottles there?
I don't know.
Taking a look at Boyd's backstory, we see how he really changed the town into something completely new. It's thanks to Boyd's desire to explore and not being a fucking clown like the rest of these sheep that they ended up finding the goat, and therefore the animals they now eat to survive, and a random stone hut full of magical talismans that protect them from the monsters. But hold on, wait a second, where did these talismans come from? And why were all 12 of them just coincidentally placed in the same location? Did someone put them there to be found? Or were they actually hidden by someone who went insane a long time ago, the same way that Ion Abbey and Christopher did? It's kinda convenient that they were all in that place, especially if the symbols on the tunnels are supposed to mean there is, or were, two different huts with these talismans. And I just want to say season 1 was by far the best of the show, and I'll make a video explaining why it's simply so much better than the second. But one of the most interesting things that happened was in the 10th episode, and that was, of course...
Hello? Is there someone there?
Yes, we're here. Oh my God, you have no idea. We don't have very much time. Where are you?
Whoa, slow down. Is this Jim?
Sorry, what?
Jim Matthews?
This scene blew my fucking mind. Does it mean they were being watched this entire time? Was the radio caller somebody that came to Fromland the same way everyone else did? Or is he one of the designers? Was the person on the phone trying to threaten them, or was it a warning? Now I wonder if the person on the phone isn't even spying on anybody and could just be a character we already know from the future, or a character who will arrive in the town in the future. It's possible that they end up going back in time one way or the other, and the guy on the phone accidentally or intentionally picks up a call from the past version of Jim Matthews, realizes what's going on, so he tries to warn him about the consequences of those actions. But he fails to give a proper explanation because dragging out the plot, of course. But then we get to the big one, the bracelet.
Mom?
Yeah,
What's wrong?
nothing.
The importance of the bracelet is something that's very easy to miss in this show, unless you start trying to connect all of these pieces together, which I'm definitely trying to do. Tabitha told Jim Matthews that when she was in the diner going through the old stuff left by all of the people who've come to Fromville at one point or another, she found a bracelet, and not just any bracelet, but the same exact one that Jim Matthews lost the night Julie was born. So obviously that makes you ask the question, how the fuck did it end up in Fromville? To me, the answer has always been clear. Someone put it there. I know, shocking. I absolutely believe that the entire point of placing it there was to ensure Tabitha and possibly Jim, and the other two of course, would come to Fromland. But who did it? I wouldn't be surprised if a future version of Jim or Tabitha, or maybe even Ethan or Julie, was the one who stole the bracelet in the past, in order to, as they say, not fuck up the timeline. I've seen people discussing whether or not Victor's mother also has that same bracelet, and it's not all that problematic until you remember that this scene with Victor's mom happened around 40 years ago.
His mother.
All right, then why the fuck am I having visions of a story some dead woman told 40 years ago?
Which is not only decades before the Matthews got to Farmland, but also decades before Tabitha ever made that bracelet to begin with. The time travel opens up many possibilities, for sure, to Martin and Ethan being the same person, to the theory of Victor's mother actually being Julie, which is insane, but kinda explains why she'd be wearing that bracelet. It also opens up the door of, even if that's the case, does it mean that Julie ends up leaving Fromville but then gets brought back? Did she tell Victor and Eloise that she's been here before, or did she lose her memories of the town after she left the first time? I guess if it's true, she probably lost her memories about it, because there's hints throughout the show that when you leave, you lose your memories. And I just want to remind you that we know the name of Victor's mother, and it's Miranda, because you can see it in the credits. But still, if she lost all of her memories, then I guess she would have to get a different name. But because of Abby saying that the town reminds her of a dream she had as a child, and Elgin being unable to remember things he subconsciously knows are important, like the Brundles and something about Smiley's body, it makes you wonder if they've been here before and they lost their memories of the town, or their memories completely. We don't know. We don't know about Abby's childhood or even Elgin's childhood. If we find out that they were orphans or they had amnesia or something like that, then it definitely opens up the door to all sorts of things. And I also want to talk about the idea of soul ties is something this story has explored before, specifically through Jade's backstory, where he was explicitly told that the dead come with you when they go. I'm going to talk about this more in the future as well, but basically it's very clear that these people are somehow tethered to Fromville, so even when you leave, you will end up back here one way or another. The reason why, I'm not sure, but I suspect it's because Farmland itself is alive and wants the residents to fulfill a specific task, and it won't let go of them until they've done whatever that task is. It's very obvious that the flame on the lighthouse is meant to be some sort of heart of Farmland. It's not a coincidence that Christie talked about the sun being the source of all life on Earth, and then we saw what will obviously be revealed to be our metaphorical sun in future seasons just a few episodes later. And I have thoughts about how it connects to the entities, but here's a hint. It's the mother flame. The meaning of the symbols on the talisman is something I've been very curious about, and I keep wondering what the overlapping bodies are meant to signify. Multiple universes collapsing into each other, forming the universe we know as Farmland, or is it actually supposed to represent multiple timelines? Perhaps the characters in the show are more related than we know, but I guess that would make this story very, very similar to Dark, which, by the way, is an infinitely better written story, except the third season, which felt very rushed to me because of the lack of significance of some characters. Time travel would mean that the boy in white may not have been completely lying when he lured Tabitha to the tower under the illusion that she can save the children in white. Perhaps the children are still in the tower, just in a different time period. When Boyd and Sarah get directed to go into the tree by the boy in white, Boyd ends up at the dungeon, but Sarah seemingly went straight to the church. So how did that happen? In the final episode of season 2, Boyd ends up going back to the dungeon, but he can't get in until he brings back the torch that he took the first time. It's only after lighting it that he's able to go back to the dungeon. Does the boy in white have the power to decide the destination that you'll go to when you go inside of the tree? Or did another entity intercept Boyd's teleportation? Or was something else going on there? It's worth pointing out that Boyd had a talisman in both these cases, whereas Sarah didn't. Could be that the talismans allow you to time travel when exposed to certain amounts of magic. I say magic because the first time he went through a faraway tree, And the second time he didn't, but he was standing in what's obviously a very magical place. It's impossible to say though if it's the talisman that does it or it happened because Boyd had an object that was tied to that specific time in history. Perhaps because Boyd had a talisman before going through the tree, he wound up at the same year those talismans were made. Might be a similar scenario with the torch. If you need an object from that time period to time travel, then it would perfectly explain the logic of placing those bottles with years written on them on the bottle tree. And it makes you wonder if Sarah and Boyd got time traveled when the trees were moving that night because they'd opened one of the bottles already. It's also an interesting premise because remember, Tabitha had Victor's lunchbox when she went into the bottle tree. Though I guess that supports the importance of the talismans in time traveling cause that computer is way too modern for the 1970s. When someone finally went into the caves after the writers stalled that plotline for 8 episodes, Jade ends up seeing the kids in white and of course the symbol, but they just magically disappear shortly afterwards. The same exact thing happens to Jade when he sees the Boulder guy and when he sees the psycho-ass Civil War soldier. But why? Why do they disappear shortly after Jade sees them? Jade might have an ability that allows him to see glimpses of the past of Fromville, or are these memories of past lives? Reincarnation is something I've started thinking about and might possibly explain why specific things have happened. For example, the bracelet. It might simply be that Tabitha's soul always wants to make that bracelet in each of her lives. In the same way people have said Tabitha's behavior towards Victor is very motherly. It could be because there's a soul bond between them and Tabitha could be responding subconsciously to that because he was her son in a previous life. Boyd finding the talismans could be a similar thing where one of his old lives was the one who placed the talismans there in the first place and he was subconsciously drawn to that place for the same reason. If this is the case, then Jade's visions could be as simple as him seeing events through the eyes of his many past lives, i.e. soul memories. It also explains why Abby says Cromville reminds her of a dream she used to have when she was a little girl. Elgin also says that he knows this is a horrible place. Both of those feelings about this place could be explained through that idea of soul memories. But of course, parallel dimensions, alternate universes, alternate timelines, those are all perfectly valid explanations as well because that scene where Boyd lights the torch in the dungeon, especially because Sarah specifies that there is an entity at that same moment, they just couldn't see it, absolutely implies an alternate dimension or something like that. Parallel universe, whatever you wanna call it, you know what I mean, whatever you wanna call it. Tabitha having Victor's lunchbox might be crucial for her to find a way back to Fromland. It might work as a key to open up a portal in the same way the torch opened a way for Boyd to get to the dungeon. Maybe all these concepts will be a part of the story, or maybe only one of them will. We'll just have to wait and see what happens.